TJ here again, here at the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, going solo on this one. And a couple people that are mutual acquaintances of Mac and mine, they asked, is there any more movies I could suggest? And I said, well, of course. This part three contains movies that, and maybe I'd give a B or a B plus to. And but for whatever reason, didn't make parts 1 and 2. I've still seen them 2, 3, 4, 5, even more times, perhaps. And here's part 3. And the first couple movies I'm going to touch on are movies I really wish I could have put in parts 1 or 2. They're really good. They're period pieces. I love them. I just, lack of time, lack of space, they just didn't make it into part 1 and part 2. One movie I just plain forgot about, because I would have liked to have had that in one of the first 2 parts, and I just forgot about it until too late. Another one on the list, I'll admit, was a B, but the more I watched it, the more I liked it, and honestly, the more I researched it, I really came to have a greater appreciation for it, and I'll let you know when we get to that one. A couple people asked me why this movie or that movie, or why not this one, and the shorter answer is, I guess, just personal taste. I would also say that if the weapons usage was just too over the top or something, then I might watch it a time or two, but put it down and not think about it again. But anyways, without any further rambling, let's get going. I hope you like them. The last one I might catch heat for. Someone might say, it shouldn't be on the list. By all means, bring some smoke on me. And so let's get going.
We begin with Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, a spectacular movie about naval warfare during the time of Napoleon's reign in France. The soundtrack contains classical music. I couldn't help but listen to it over and over again. It was just so beautiful. In it would star Russell Crowe as Captain Jack Aubrey, captain of the British warship HMS Surprise. Russell Crowe really enjoyed playing this character. Next we have Paul Bettany. He plays the ship's doctor. And I've often thought of this character as the moral compass of the movie, and to Russell Crowe's character, Captain Jack Aubrey. Here we have a young Max Purkis, and he played a young midshipman. The plot would involve the British warship HMS Surprise pursuing a French privateer warship, the Acheron. As part of the plot, the Acheron was more heavily armed, making it more difficult for the HMS Surprise to engage. Most countries back at that time used what was called privateers, and the easiest way to describe them would be, you could think of privateers as a type of naval mercenary. Another picture here of Russell Crowe playing Captain Jack Aubrey. And the movie begins in the southern Atlantic, where the HMS Surprise and the French privateer warship Acheron have their initial engagements, at which point the HMS Surprise pursues the Acheron south around the tip of South America and into the southern Pacific, where they have their final engagement. My research tells me that Russell Crowe thoroughly enjoyed making this movie and thoroughly enjoyed playing the part of Captain Jack Aubrey, so much so that he has personally petitioned a sequel to this movie. At this time, given my research, I've seen no evidence of a sequel, but perhaps at some point Russell Crowe will get his way? We'll find out. This is a great movie, great naval war battles for this time period, and ultimately, this movie should have been one of the first two parts, a mistake I'm fixing right now. Next, we have Last of the Mohicans. This takes place in colonial America, French and Indian War, and it had some pretty intense frontier Indian fight scenes and battles between British and French forces also. I knew a guy who watched this movie and was so impressed with the whole black powder musket. He went out and bought himself a black powder rifle, even though black powder rifles today are more technically advanced than they were back then, but it had some pretty intense scenes involving black powder guns and Indian fighting techniques, and the movie was based on James Fenimore Cooper's novel written in 1826, a novel that Mark Twain gave a thumbs down to, per my research. But in any event, the movie was originally about 3 hours long, and Fox made, Michael Mann, the producer, made Michael Mann cut it down to about 2 hours. If you have a chance, and if you can find it on disc, get the extended cut, and that way you get to see an extra hour of movie there, and it was pretty good. And I bet you didn't expect to see this guy, because I sure didn't. Dale Dye. The same guy who helped as a technical advisor in a whole lot of the war movies that I've mentioned in the first two parts. But as I was doing research for this, I found out that he was a technical advisor for this movie, and basically showed the British, the guys playing the British soldiers, how to march around in formation. Daniel Day-Lewis would play the character Nathaniel, and as I was researching the movie, the word was he thoroughly enjoyed playing this character. Madeline Stowe would play the character Cora Monroe, the love interest of Nathaniel, Daniel Day-Lewis's character. Russell Means would play the Indian character Chingachgook, and this character was the adopted father of Daniel Day-Lewis's character Nathaniel. Didn't give much information, just part of the backstory of the relationship between the two characters. Wes Studi would play the Indian character Magua, and Magua here was the designated bad guy of the movie. And this was a really, really good movie. Should have had this in one of the first two parts. Another mistake I'm fixing here. And you get a chance, watch it. You can't go wrong with this one. Here we have the movie Zulu, and it is loosely based on the engagement at an installation called Rorke's Drift, and I say loosely based. The backstory is, on about 22 January 1879, the British in open terrain would suffer what is still regarded as one of their worst military defeats in a single day. Upon the Zulu completely decimating the British unit, they then move on the installation Rorke's Drift, which only had not even 200 men there, most of which were sick since they used it as a medical installation of sorts. I've read military commentary on the engagements, and there was the comparison of the British force being annihilated in open terrain, and then they compared to just a couple hundred guys at most fighting from a fortified position. And while the movie is loosely based on the Rorke's Drift engagement, the British were able to successfully repel the Zulus at Rorke's Drift. This is a pretty good movie, even though there's some exaggeration. In it stars a very young Michael Caine as a young British lieutenant. You had Stanley Baker also as an engineer lieutenant. And no way could I leave this guy out. Nigel Green. He plays the role of a sergeant, and I tell you, he's a sergeant's sergeant. I almost could have watched the movie just for this guy. Played it great, loved his part, really loved this movie. It's a thumbs up, even though the engagement itself is exaggerated historically. It's a great movie. You can't go wrong. If you get a chance, you gotta watch this movie. Next is The Big Red One, a Sam Fuller production. I will confess, the first time I saw this movie, I thought, it's okay. But then I watched it again, and I liked it a little bit better. And this is one of those movies, the more I watched it, the more I grew to love it. Also, as I was doing research for this movie, it's got a very interesting backstory. The original movie came out in 1980, and to the chagrin of Sam Fuller, the movie company made Sam Fuller cut. Sam Fuller claims close to half of his original cut, but in 2004 there was a project, and it was called The Reconstruction, and they basically went back to the archives, took all the film, re-edited the movie, added 40 more minutes to what was originally released in 1980. So in 2004 you had the re-release of The Big Red One, The Reconstruction. I would suggest that if you have a chance, get the 2-disc The Reconstruction edition. It has so many cool extras in it. It was as good as the movie itself, I'd tell you. The second disc contained interviews, and what they did was they went back 20 years later and they found Mark Hamill and Robert Carradine, and even Sam Fuller's daughter, and they interviewed them, and it was really kind of interesting to see how some of the actors that were still alive reminisced the production of The Big Red One in its initial release. And if you get a chance, I really suggest you get the 2-disc, The Reconstruction edition. Here we see Sam Fuller smoking a cigar. He was known for smoking cigars. In the second disc of the Reconstruction edition, they have an interview of him, and he's talking about how John Wayne wanted to play the character, the sergeant in the movie, and he thought John Wayne was a great actor, but that was part of the problem. He was looking for lesser known actors. He was also looking for someone to play the sergeant who had the look of old and tired and just worn out by the war itself. An interesting fact about Sam Fuller is he himself was a World War II vet from the European theater, and in listening to the different interviews, I kind of came to the conclusion that Sam Fuller was kind of his own technical advisor as to how he wanted to portray the scenes, since he himself had pretty much been through it. In this picture, we see Lee Marvin on the far right. He plays the sergeant of the squad, and that is the character that Sam Fuller chose Lee Marvin to play over John Wayne. In this picture, you see Mark Hamill to the far left, and then next to him is Robert Carradine. And if you can make it out, Robert Carradine has got a cigar sticking out of his mouth. And that is the character Robert Carradine plays to depict Sam Fuller. The character itself goes by a different name, but Robert Carradine's character was intended to portray Sam Fuller. Just another picture of the main cast. Lee Marvin, the sergeant, with his 4 privates. And Sam Fuller would insist that all these characters seen here depicted someone that he knew when serving in the European theater. The movie begins in North Africa, then Italy, and then from Italy it shows D-Day, and upon the D-Day invasion, the movie follows them as they would drive into Germany and the conclusion of World War II. Just another picture of the guys here, and one last bit of trivia regarding Lee Marvin and the other 4 cast members. Prior to the filming, Mark Hamill and Robert Carradine, in their interviews, would later say how Lee Marvin took the 4 of them out to a gun range and by the numbers gave them a class on the handling, shooting, disassembly and assembly of the M1 Garand. It was very important to Lee Marvin that they knew how to handle that rifle. I found that very interesting. Basically, Lee Marvin was also a technical advisor to Sam Fuller in that regard. I give this movie a thumbs up. If you get a chance, get the 2-disc edition, and by all means, enjoy it. Act of Valor. A project of 2 guys who refer to themselves as the Bandito Brothers. 2 guys by the name of Scotty Wall and Mouse McCoy. You got Navy SEALs playing Navy SEALs, real Navy SEALs. And not just that, but the family members of the actual Navy SEALs play the family members of the Navy SEALs. And I found all that very interesting. This movie, I would suggest, watch it the first time, and if you got it on disc and have the special features, watch it a second time with the producer comments that are made during the movie. Basically, what you got is Scotty and Mouse commenting basically scenario by scenario what they did. Initially, this began as the Navy wanting to produce video intended for training and recruitment. They wanted to get some actual footage and use it to their advantage. And the guys, Scotty and Mouse, who call themselves the Bandito Brothers, they at some point thought, hey, why don't we just throw in some dialogue? We could turn this into a movie. And that's pretty much what they did. And the interesting thing about some of the dialogue, and I'll tell you, they insist that the plot is all fiction, and they don't use the SEALs' real names, but the plot is fiction. But the scenarios, they claim, are very real, similar to things they may have done on previous missions. And the dialogue in some of these, like the briefings, the after actions, or how they talk to each other while they're doing their missions, a lot of that was ad-libbed because a lot of it was, in some part to the Navy SEALs, another training mission. According to the Bandito Brothers, they would say to the Navy SEALs, "Hey, we want to do an assault on this millionaire's yacht. How would you do it?" And they think up an operations plan and execute it. And so a lot of the movie was kind of ad-libbed, and I thought that was kind of cool, actually. I was a little disappointed that the critics were kind of down on this movie. It didn't do very well in the movie theaters. I guess one of the things was they said it was too predictable and whatnot, and I was kind of disappointed at how it. I wish it could have been received better than it was. But thumbs up. Get a chance. This is a great movie. Perhaps another one I should have had in part 1 or part 2. But you get a chance, you got to see this. Speaking of SEALs, I thought I'd throw in the CBS SEAL Team. I know it's not a movie, television program, but pretty good for a television program, I'll tell you. The weapons handling seems fairly accurate. And they really do a pretty good job of making the SEAL team guys look like the heroes that they really are in real life. And thought I'd just throw this in. Just a picture of the main cast here, and I'll go from left to right. You got A.J. Buckley as Sonny Quinn, Neil Brown as Ray Perry, Max Theriot, who plays correction, David Boreanaz, who plays Jason Hayes, and Max Theriot, who plays Clay Spencer. Ooh, and I thought I'd throw in Tony Trucks. She plays a naval officer. And a little bit of trivia, she hails from Michigan. The small town by the name of Manistee, she's from the Manistee area. And I couldn't leave her out. So if you're looking for something to watch on TV, try SEAL Team. Yeah, I know, because it's on TV, they got to tame it down. Can't have it too salty on public television. But I think it's a pretty good show. They do a pretty good job in depicting Navy SEALs, I think. The Great Raid. Actual mission: raid on Cabanatuan on the Philippine island of Luzon. The mission was executed January 30th, 1945. It involved the 6th Ranger Battalion and Philippine guerrillas. Their mission was to rescue about 500, maybe 511 POWs. They had been POWs pretty much the entire war. The United States had begun to hear reports of what the Japanese were doing to the POWs, basically kind of killing them. And the mission itself had no strategic value other than it was a mission to save life. And in 2005, Army Chief of Staff General Peter Schumacher, when he was speaking to an audience, said, "There is perhaps no other story which illustrates each and every tenet of the warrior ethos like the Great Raid." And it's another movie that didn't get great reviews, could have done better at the box office, but it's a pretty good movie, and it seems fairly accurate with the exception of one point that I'll get to later on here. Here we have on the left Benjamin Bratt. He would play the battalion commander, and on the right James Franco played a company commander. Then you had Joseph Finn. He played a POW that was ultimately rescued. Unfortunately, the movie left out one piece of information here, and in their defense, I don't know how they could have added it, but along with the Philippine guerrillas, you had a 130-man unit referred to as the Alamo Scouts. They were military personnel, and they worked with the Philippine guerrillas in coordinating this mission with the Ranger unit. This 130-man Alamo Scout unit has become known as one of the forerunners of what we now know today as the Special Forces Group, the Green Beret. Next we have an HBO production, When Trumpets Fade. It involves the actual Battle of Hurtgen Forest, and historically speaking, it is seen as one of the bloodiest engagements of World War II, but unfortunately, not long after this engagement, the Battle of the Bulge occurred, in which the Germans made their one last push in an effort to win. And given the events of the Battle of the Bulge, the battle for Hurtgen Forest seems to have gotten lost in the mix. Here we have Ron Eldard, who plays the character Manning. And I don't know how possible this could really be, but this is how it goes in the movie. Starts off as a private, and he's like the only guy who survives. And because he's the only guy who survived, he becomes a sergeant squad leader. Well, because he survives engagement after engagement, he eventually becomes a lieutenant. And this all occurs within a week's time frame easily. And the guy's just trying. The weird part about all this is the guy's just trying to stay alive, and he keeps getting promoted because of it. Here we have Martin Donovan, who plays Captain Pritchett, Manning's commanding officer, and the guy who promotes him to sergeant. The country music singer Dwight Yoakam, he plays the battalion commander, and this is the guy who promotes Manning from sergeant to lieutenant. So the bottom line on this one is I give it a lukewarm thumbs up. I guess what bothered me the most was after I watched the movie, I was just depressed. Uh, it was just I just featured misery upon misery, and maybe that's what war really is. It's just nothing but misery. Here we have A Bridge Too Far. You know, most movies celebrate or depict great victories. You know, not so in this one. This one pretty much depicts the failed Operation Market Garden. This is believed to be the brainchild of the British General Montgomery, a fact that one person noted seemed to be conveniently left out of this movie. The phrase "a bridge too far" was believed to have been used by a Polish officer in the preparatory phase of this operation. In the movie, you see it used toward the end, but historically speaking, it's suspected that as they were preparing for this operation, a Polish officer made reference to he felt this was a bridge too far. It's believed that this movie did accurately depict the sequence of events of a poorly designed operation. It involved airborne units being dropped to secure bridges at Nijmegen, Wesel, and Arnhem, and then a armored unit would come to the rescue, make a push, and come and help advance the Allied lines and secure the bridges. And what it was is it was a perfect storm of what could go wrong. The combination of the Germans suspecting that the Allies were going to try something, so they repositioned their SS Panzer units, and how the Dutch resistance information was just completely ignored, leading to a colossal defeat. So in it here we have a young James Caan playing a sergeant, Robert Redford, who plays a Major Cook, Anthony Hopkins, who plays a British officer. On the left here we have Sean Connery as a British officer, and on the right, Gene Hackman, whose character is that of a Polish officer. On the left we have Michael Caine, who plays a British officer in an armored unit, and as it's shown in the movie, the armored units attempt to drive to the three bridges that the airborne troopers had taken, and it was just one road, and it was basically a shooting gallery. As the tanks were trying to make a run to the bridges, the SS Panzer divisions hidden in the woods, they just it was like a shooting gallery to them, and just picked them off one right after another. Needless to say, they weren't able to get to the airborne units in time, and Arnhem ultimately fell, and those who weren't killed were taken POW. I guess you could say another lukewarm thumbs up. It was an okay movie if you like watching about the Allies getting their butts kicked. And finally, the movie I think I'll probably take some heat on, Battle Los Angeles. Well, I know some are thinking, what's a sci-fi movie doing on the list? What I found interesting about this movie was present-day Marines, given their gear and weaponry, taking on invading aliens. And in a little bit of research I was able to do, the producers did seek out some Marine technical advisors because they at least wanted to have the weapons handling down, and I guess they wanted their actors to look convincing as they played Marine characters. Here we have Aaron Eckhart playing a platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Nance, and I honestly thought he did a half-decent job at it. Then you had Michelle Rodriguez. She played a Air Force Technical Sergeant, Air Force Forward Air Controller. Did okay, I guess. I had trouble believing that one, to be honest. So you had Marines fighting aliens. I thought the ending was a little over the top, a little too much, but at the end of the day, it was worth the cost of a red box rental fee. So why not? Why not watch it? So that's it. That's my part 3. Hope you liked them. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. And as we always end here on the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.